Many Canadians have heard a lot of claims. Mark Carney says that he cares about the economy. Pierre Poilievre says that Mark Carney is a globalist and is only as fanatical on the carbon tax as Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould. Now I have receipts from Mark Carney's own mouth about his position on ESG and how he feels that the world is not moving fast enough and that Canada needs to do more. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Liberal Party hopeful Mark Carney, who might very well be an unelected Prime Minister of Canada, was on a podcast with what is today the current Housing Minister of Canada, MP Erskine Smith. And they were talking about Mark Carney's vision for the economy, the global economy, and how there's nothing that Canadians can do about it because it's the law of the land. We'll get into how I don't agree with him in any way, shape, or form. Now I'm going to let you hear, in his own words, a couple of snippets because it's important to understand that this is his position before he stood up on the microphone and told you that he cared about what was going on with the economy. So which one do we want to believe? We want to believe the one that he said when he didn't think anybody was looking, or do we want to believe the one where he said when he was in Edmonton trying to convince everybody that he's some sort of, he's a changed man, he's different than the rest of them?
And I'm going to talk about that aspect of it, and specifically, what is the financial sector doing and not doing to get capital to solutions to address climate change? And in essence, that's what sustainable finance is. And all the work that I and others have been doing, particularly since 3 years ago, almost to the day, around the world, investors, people managing people's pensions, that they have the information that's needed in order to judge who's part of the solution and who's still part of the problem.
That was Mark Carney talking about how he's been instrumental in making sure that companies that are not investing in places that he doesn't agree with don't get away with it, and that businesses that may not be able to afford or be able to start up without his approval or without the approval or the loans of people who are managing investment funds and pension funds are going to be able to keep those companies closed down while they themselves incorporate everything into corporations that are controlled specifically by the money that they have from people's pensions.
The Canadian context. So you had said in 2019, I think, you'd expressed some frustration in one of your speeches about, and this wasn't specific to Canada, but the global pace of progress towards sustainable finance was moving far too slow.
Yeah, well, let me give a global context first. It's a global event, global context. We operate in a global market.
So 5 years ago, he was on record as saying that he doesn't think that the world is moving fast enough to the green economy that's going to make his company at billions of dollars while putting the middle class out of work completely. Then he says, well, let me put it to you in a global context, because despite me saying 100 times that I'm not a globalist, I just said right there that I work in a global economy. It's kind of a contradiction.
Over 700 of the world's largest financial institutions, controlling over 40% of the financial assets in the world. They're all committed to shift the management of those assets consistent with the transition towards net zero. In other words, to help companies and countries and municipalities get their emissions down. And by the way, that what comes with that is if somebody isn't trying to get their emissions down, then money is shifting from those companies in one example to those who are doing something.
So there you have it. The man admits that he works with people who control 40% of the world's income, and they are pushing municipalities, they are pressuring governments, they are pressuring everybody to put the laws in their favor so that if somebody isn't doing something with a company that they disagree with, like if somebody's using a process that they disagree with, they can take all of the funding away from them and they can move it into somebody that they have started, right? Because they have all the money, so they can fire up a company anytime they want, which of course will destroy any startups, will destroy any small guy who just wants to get going. And I believe that Canada has enough corporations. Like the one thing that we need to talk about as Canadians is the destruction of the corporation. We shouldn't have all of our grocery stores controlled by the same 3 to 5 companies. We shouldn't have only, 3 or 4 choices from where we can buy our fuel. The only way that we can stop the destruction of the middle class is to have the middle class going back to work, because that's how the middle class does. That's what the middle class is rooted in, is the ability to be their own boss, in a small way, have a little small office in the house, them and maybe 2 vans, that kind of stuff. Or, him and the wife and 3 of the kids start the store, and all of the examples that TV used to be able to show us, but can no longer show us because corporations and gigantic monolithic corporations who just crush the middle class don't really care about it anymore. And this man just admit that he thinks that if you don't do it his way, he's going to take your money away, which is all that we've been talking about, right? The carbon tax is a penalty on people who don't do it their way. The carbon tax is a penalty on your food. It increases the cost of your living. It destroys the economy, but it doesn't destroy his economy because he then can swoop in and buy up the process for pennies on the dollar and make himself a lot of money while me and you sit on the outside freezing cold, going hungry, wondering, why did we ever agree to this in the first place? Those are his words, not mine. I'm only pointing it out to you. And then what I'd like you to really pay attention to, if you go back and listen to it, is how he said we can do it for governments and municipalities as well, who borrow a lot of money from places like this. They borrow money from people who control the pension funds of the government, that control the pension funds of the auto workers union. You'll remember when Florida pulled all of their pension money out of BlackRock. There's a lot of companies out there that's all they do. They just essentially survive on looking after and managing the money of the independent and the middle class. And now they're turning around and saying, well, we're going to use that very money against you if you don't do it our way.
Fast forward to Canada, or shift to Canada, what we don't yet have is the disclosure regime fully operating so that Canadians can judge who's doing the right thing or not. A number of Canadian institutions are doing it voluntarily, but it's not required for everyone, like it is in Europe,
right,
like it is in the UK and elsewhere. And secondly, we don't have a framework, an accepted way or a consistent way of putting together those plans.
There's so many things wrong with what he just said. First of all, when he was asked to go for a conflict of interest on the economic policies that he's looking after, he refused. So why is he hiding what he's earning, how he's earning his money from Canadian population, from the Canadian people? Why is he hiding it and expecting companies and corporations to voluntarily give the information to him? Then he says, oh no, companies are voluntarily doing it in Canada, just not in a way that we agree with. There's no framework for that. But you just said that they're doing it in Europe. So if they're already doing it, there must already be a framework. Oh, what you mean is that there's not your approval on every single solitary dollar traveling around the economy. That you don't have the absolute control over all of the money and deciding who can get what and who can do what and who can't do what.
But the bigger point, which I think you're driving at, is, okay, but why are companies going to do this? Companies and financial institutions are going to do this because Canadians and people around the world want them to do it. After all, they elected a government, your government, over the course, and a number of provincial governments that have climate action at the core of their platforms. After all, it is the law of the land. It literally is the law of the land in Canada that we transition towards net zero. Now, how we do that requires certain policies from government, and a number are being put in place. More will be required without question. But financial institutions and companies in Canada and elsewhere around the world react to those policies, and they react to the values of people. And
Well. It seems that Mark Carney is, in fact, quite the globalist and very hot to trot to do carbon tax on people. But the law of the land has changed. Many of the governments no longer care. The provincial governments, federal governments, global governments no longer focus on worrying about the environment while crime rates go through the roof, while immigration is out of control, while companies like yourself don't care what happens to the country itself so that you can try to dissolve all the borders. Because when you're a globalist, you don't want to care about the borders. And so it seems a strange thing to say that you would be saying that that's what the country wants. People don't care. People want to have a good dollar. They want to have prosperity, and the rest of it will work itself out. as we are already one of the cleanest countries on earth, I think it probably would be best for us to just put a pause on all of the chaos and the madness until the rest of the world catches up to us. There's no sense in us running, 4 or 5 light years ahead of the rest of them if they're still doing nothing to improve their own environments. And perhaps you should be taking this discussion to the Middle East or Africa or Asia. Perhaps over there you can influence people's decisions with your money. Something tells me that you don't have the 60% of the money that you don't control is in those regions, and they don't care what you have to say. You're just admitting right there that what you want to do, here I said, some of those government changes are coming, but more will be required. He's going to make so much regulation, just like you hear this part of the problem. There's going to be so much regulation you won't be able to build a house. There's going to be so much regulation you won't be able to build a company. There's going to be so much regulation that you won't be able to do anything without the permission of the totalitarian government formerly known as the liberals. There's going to be so much regulation that it'll all have to be approved by whoever Mark Carney puts in charge of approval of that, or Chrystia Freeland or Karina Gould. Doesn't matter. They're all the same, obviously. This is when he's speaking before he's going in front of everybody telling you that he cares about what's happening with the economy. He doesn't care. He's still complaining at Trump because Trump is not going to do what he wants. He sees that all of the dollars that he set up to be sold directly to Trump have now vanished. He seems to believe that the world is still following along blindly on this woke agenda, but they are not. But that's not stopping him because he has a huge amount of money invested in it. It only benefits people like him. If he can control what all corporations are doing with their money, if he can control who gets the loans and who doesn't, if he can control who gets the investments and who doesn't, if he can control what can be built where by whom, then he basically becomes the emperor, and the rest of us will just go deeper and deeper into poverty, and it will resemble any of a number of countries that we can name. It'll look like feudal Europe. It'll look like the Holy Roman Empire. Now, I know you might say to yourself, well, you can this, you can that. There's a lot of changes, a lot of alterations that can happen, blah, blah, blah. However, I saved the best little snippet for last because I want you to hear it from his own mouth.
I work in a subset of ESG, so ESG, environmental, social, and governance. I work on the environment bit of it, and I work in a subset of the environment, which is the transition towards a low-carbon economy or net zero.
So he works in only the section where the money is. He only cares about the carbon tax. He only cares about how in the Middle East he can run a pipeline, but in Canada they can't run a pipeline so that all of the money that he makes can come out of the money that's being generated in the Middle East. He doesn't care that all got to go onto a boat and that there's all kinds of environmental problems over there. He only wants you to stop producing it so that later when you're flat broke, he can come in and buy up that as well and then turn that into more profit as well, like he wants to be doing, like you will own nothing and you will be happy. Because there are so many people in the world that own nothing and they're just ecstatic about it. They are just so excited that they're looking at us thinking, why don't you just want to own nothing like we do? Like my 15 generations of family has never owned anything. We all live in the same kitchen and it's great. It's lovely. We are so excited about it that we will crawl, scrape, steal, beg, prostitute ourselves to get to the country that you live in so that we can own something. This guy here, though, he wants to be in charge of how much carbon is manufactured in anything that he can control. And he's doing it with the help of the liberal government. He's doing it at the behest of other people who are of a like Marxist mentality. But he is not doing it because he wants the environment to be clean. He's doing it because he's manipulating you into giving him the power that he is going to use to destroy the very lifestyle that you live. Which is why he invests in it in other parts of the world, but not in this one, because this is the section of the world that they're looking to take control of. Europe and North America have one thing in common. They all have a middle class. And without the middle class, we have no freedom. Now, I will do a different one on that because I don't think people appreciate or understand the strength and the purpose of it. One of the reasons that our economy is collapsing, however, is because decisions that are based on ESG are destroying the middle class and are destroying our ability to make money. So they want to turn everybody's economy into China's. I'm not sure which model they're following, but I know that it's not the model that we currently have. And you heard it from his own mouth. He's quite pleased with himself to say that I'm the one looking after all of the carbon tax. If this guy becomes Prime Minister of Canada, it will only be the exact same policies that have already been put in place, because you can darn toot yourself that Justin Trudeau had a speed dial directly to Mark Carney. And so do all of the rest of them. They are all part of the same organization that is not Canadian in its intent and not Canadian in its morality. Let me know what you think. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.